Chairman of the Southbridge Town Council, bringing you another edition through the Southbridge Cable TV station of our Chairman Chats. I'm here today with Dr. Jeff Villar, the Superintendent Receiver of the Southbridge School System, and we'd like to welcome you back to Chairman Chats. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
It's great to have you back. I think we had you here about a year ago, I believe.
Feels that way, yes.
Yeah, and it's hard to believe another year. We actually survived another year.
Yes, we have.
So as of today, how long have you been in the system now?
I'm approaching 2 years. February will be the 2-year mark.
Okay. And I think the last time we had a really good discussion about what you perceived of the schools and some of the initiatives that you wanted to put in, and a lot of that we talked about at that time was culture and climate. Any updates as to the progress you've seen or the issues that are still there?
Yeah, I remain convinced culture and climate is the way that we need to continue to focus our resources and our efforts. I've certainly seen progress throughout the schools. I just had a comment today as we did a walkthrough at the high school, and the team, one of the things that came abundantly clear is that there's a more positive feel in the hallways. And that is just indication of kids feeling a little happier at school. There seems to be more respect, kids more engaged in the classroom. So that, to me, was a really good takeaway. We have been working on this in all of our schools, K through 12. Our partner, University of Connecticut, has been a very strong supporter of that. We've seen a lot of support with our teachers and family members. We even have parents working on some of our committees. And so we are seeing progress. We got a long way to go. We're not where I want us to be, but I certainly really am happy that I feel a much better improvement in schools, and we have data that supports that feeling too.
And you are a huge data-driven person when it comes to the accountability of not only teachers but students, correct?
Yes. For example, we use a tool called the Classroom Management Observation Tool. It's developed by the University of Connecticut. It's an observational tool that our teams use every month when we go into schools, and we capture a data set based on observation. And what's great is year over year in every category in all the schools we're seeing improvement. So that's a consistent, steady improvement. It's a pretty granular tool, so that means over time it'll take a while to get that massive change, but we're really happy to see that there is progress, and so we know we're working on the right things.
So we talk about the culture, the climate of the school district. Why is that so important in a classroom and in a school setting?
Well, learning is inherently social, so you need people to be getting along well to learn. You need an environment where children are able to take risks, both social, emotionally, between friends, but also academically. And they need to feel respected by each other and by their teachers. They need to respect the person that's teaching them, and that person needs to respect them. So that's like a big equation that you need to get right to create an environment that's really conducive to learning. In a negative climate or negative environment, you're not likely to get kids taking risks. You're not likely to get teachers engaged and really working hard to make sure kids are learning. And you start to see a lot of antisocial behaviors. So for us, it's about setting the stage for learning, and that means kids need to feel emotionally and academically safe.
So going hand in hand with that, we've always talked over the last number of years with all the disruptions that we've had throughout the system for probably the last at least 7 to 10 years. What have you seen over the last 2 years? Because now you're here 2 years, probably the longest serving superintendent, receiver, in a 10-year period. How does that start from the top down?
I think consistency is really important. So the fact that we have identified certain priorities and stayed with it over a 2-year period of time is rather unique for, I'd say, in the last decade in the district. Each new leader brought a different vision, a different area of focus, and that causes almost whiplash among all the employees because now they have to refine their work based on their supervisor's newest priorities. So people didn't know which direction they were headed in year to year. So we have some consistency. I also have some consistency in many of the building principals. Only West Street has a new leader, the middle school and West Street have new leaders this year. I slipped on that because Misty Parsons, who's the principal of middle school, started in January last year, so it's a little bit of a shift there. But having that consistent leadership team is important. I mentioned earlier the high school climate felt better today. Well, the high school's principal's been there several years now. So it's really important to have the right people in place and keep consistent leadership so that our teachers can focus on setting their classrooms for success. And they don't need is a change in direction every year.
And also part of improving school culture, climate, we have an abundance of children in our community that have a social, economic backgrounds where they come from a lot of trauma and the issues that happen. A lot of a town like ours that's almost a city, you have specialized programs in the system as well, such as the Southbridge Academy. How is that working out and in helping with the climate and helping those students be able to be in an environment that they can succeed as well, and any success stories that we've had out of that?
Yeah, 70% of our students district-wide are economically challenged. They find themselves in poverty. And then 80% of our students are considered high-need students by the state, which means on top of maybe being high poverty, they may be a special education student. About 22% or so of our students are. About 25% of our students are English as a second language students. And nearly 60% of our students are Latino. So we have a very diverse, complex student body. You mentioned Southbridge Academy. That school, when I arrived, was really an alternative school that was in somewhat of disarray, and in large part to Dr. Farrick, the deputy superintendent, and our special education staff. They've reworked the school, and it's now a therapeutic day school with proper licensure from the state, and it serves kids with both special education needs and social emotional needs. We have about 32, 33 students enrolled. The school is leading in many indicators as far as its progress on its climate. It's one of the 3 schools that have the highest scores on, again, some of the metrics that we collect. And we're really seeing dramatic improvement in students at the school. Some life-changing changes for students. There was a Southbridge news story about a few of our students. And I actually have recently commented to the deputy superintendent where we were talking to one of the Southbridge Academy students. And all I can say is in 2 years, this child went from being really angry to a kid that was super engaged, really fun to talk to, talking about her working for basketball and working hard at her studies. And to me, it was a dramatic transformation. And that's because the school is really trying to meet the kids' needs. And they do so on multiple levels, social, emotional, and academic. We've had other districts are inquiring about tuitioning in their students in that program because I think they're starting to see the success. And we had a student graduate last year. So I'm expected we're going to have a larger number of graduates in the upcoming years. And we are examining the expansion of that program if possible. Along those lines, we do have a student tuitioning in now in our Discovery program at Charleston Street School. So some of the special needs programs are really starting to get traction, and that's good.
And so a benefit is not only to the student, because there are children, they deserve the best education that we can provide as a town. But what does that do for a financial point to the schools to maintain stability in the district?
Yeah, it's really important because these programs are not inexpensive, right? Kids with special needs need smaller classes. They need more therapeutic sessions, generally more EAs, and people with specialized talents. So they're certainly not inexpensive to run. But when you can provide a good program for kids, meet the needs of all of our local students, and then maybe have capacity to add a student or two, and then a district wants to tuition in a student, that helps offset the cost, which is great for the town. Allows us to run a really good program for our kids and economically be as efficient as possible.
And that's all important parameters for any town to be stable in that regard.
100%. And, we're always looking, might be unfortunate, I guess it depends on your perspective, but we always have to look at the bottom line and what's the cost effectiveness of any program we're putting in place. Bang for the buck, as folks would say. So when you have a program that's successful enough that folks are tuitioning in, that's great. That means you're accomplishing academic goals, and you're also likely to be running a program that's fiscally sound.
All right, now to shift gears, obviously the state took the district over, and a lot of it had to do with the dreaded MCAS scores and the talk about MCAS scores, and I know the state changes those tests around every year, but in order to succeed on those, we've always talked about, going back my years, really when I was chairman of the school committee, we always talked about the kids' ability to read and literacy as the important foundation, and that has always been a struggle, I think, in the district. And that, I think, was your second topic last year, was literacy, and any strides on improvements in that area and how you see that going forward.
Yeah, I agree. Literacy and numeracy, mathematics and language arts are super important. And so we did highlight that those two areas are going to be academic areas of focus, and we continue that focus. Very happy with our partners at the elementary school. We're working with a group called Hill for Literacy, and they're supporting and providing our teachers and principals with regular professional development. Folks might recall we do have an hour early dismissal every Wednesday, and that's allowing us to provide a lot of professional development for teachers. I point out that 65% or so of our teachers are in their first 3 years or less, so we have a lot of brand new teachers. What's really nice about the literacy program is, again, it's data-driven, so we have regular assessments. And what we're seeing in the earliest stages is year-over-year, significant year-over-year growth. Again, telling me we're headed in the right direction. These are foundational literacy skills, so knowing letters, sounds, and letter identification, knowing how to blend letters, and there's a whole host of subtests. It gives our teachers a lot of information about how to teach students. And in elementary school in particular, what they do is based on the assessment, we have a special period during the day called What I Need or WIN, and kids are grouped based on their needs for about 45 minutes of direct instruction in a small group. And they also get their full reading block, 90 minutes of teacher instruction in their whole classroom. So kids are getting grade level curriculum and also very specific instruction on any particular needs that they may have. And what we're seeing is dramatic growth in these subtest scores. So that translates out to many years from now, as kids go through school, we should begin to see dramatic improvements on larger tests, MCAS being one of them.
Okay. Any other curriculum-driven initiatives that you have this coming year or in the next year or so?
We're also working hard at the secondary level in math and language arts. When we started this initiative really last fall, a large percentage of our English classes across the district and math classes were not on grade level. Now I'm very pleased to say at 95% of the time we go into a classroom, they're on grade level content. All of our English classes are now working out of rigorous text, classic literature, and kids are required to struggle through that difficult literature. So that's giving our kids a fighting chance because they're learning the content and materials that really everyone's expected to learn. And so we've raised the bar. It doesn't mean teachers and students don't struggle. Some of these texts are quite complex. So it's not all roses. Long way to go for folks. But again, I expect that over time that's going to make a dramatic difference on kids' performance because they have to have access to grade level content. There's no way for a child to ever catch up if they are never given an opportunity to work with the same materials that kids in other districts across the state grapple with. So very pleased about that direction. We are looking at some curricular changes in mathematics in elementary school. We'll begin that process this spring. It won't be implemented till next fall. We want to give our teachers time to really absorb and master some of our language arts, because again, elementary teachers teach both content areas. But we are going to go after mathematics for the elementaries to be sure that those kids are also getting an aligned curriculum.
And as far as you talk about the newness of teachers, are you seeing that there's more teachers staying in the district willing to work hard? They have always worked hard, but given the circumstances that we have in our district, the challenges that we have, are they staying and accepting those challenges, or so it's not such a revolving door?
Yeah, and I agree with you. Our teachers work really hard. I'm proud of the fact that myself and my deputy superintendent, Dr. Ferrick, spend a lot of time in schools, hours and hours every week. And I leave every school saying, wow, these guys are working really hard. Now, how can we help them, work in the most efficient way and meet kids' needs in the best ways and with the best materials and the best training? But they certainly work hard. So to me, that's a critically important piece of our progress. And I'm sorry, the second part of your question.
Do you see them staying and wanting to accept the challenge of that?
Interesting. Not this September, the year prior. Almost every day I felt like I had a resignation. And we had tremendous staff turnover that first year. It was really frustrating. This year, a dramatic difference. So folks are staying. We've lost less than probably a handful of people since the start of school. I think part of that's because we did a couple strategies this year. First, last spring, we reached out to folks and let them know very, very early that we had a job for them. Even though we were still going through the budget, we kind of crunched numbers and said, well, these are positions we're going to have no matter what happens financially. And we sent out letters of assurance to folks. And we said, look, you have a job here in Southbridge. You're going to hear about budget talks. You're going to hear about positions changing and cutting, but you are safe. And I think that went a long way to having folks, hey, okay, this is good. The other piece is I think the weekly training has made a big difference. So people are getting support in their classrooms. Seems to help reduce frustration. Again, I'm talking generalities, so certainly we have our moments for everyone. It's a difficult work. But it has definitely cut down on the turnover. And I think having consistent leadership matters. People know who's in charge, not just me, but in their buildings. And I always say teachers work for principals, not for me. They know their principal. I'm the guy that pops in and out of their school, but their principal's there every day. So I think that relationship is critical. So far, my finger's going to be crossed, but it seems like we are improving on our turnover rate. And I'm hoping to see some dramatic changes in year 3 as we keep going, because that's critical to our success. I lament one department this summer, our math, we did lose 4 out of the 5 people. You can't have that. We need to keep our teachers for, again, it takes them 5 to 7 years to really become master teachers. But the data this year is much better. So we'll follow that through. We'll keep an eye on it. And we're going to, this spring, actually next month, begin the process sending letters out to our teachers. We'll also post for positions because we want to hire the best and brightest as soon as possible.
And to that end, I know we've had conversations. Are you looking to go out early in this spring to try to recruit teachers to want to get involved in this type of turnover work?
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually most likely after the break, so late January at the earliest. We're going to start posting anticipated vacancies. The concern is not to make current teachers worried about their stability. So we've got to also get those letters out of assurance for staff that we're keeping. So there's a little balance we have to do there. But the idea is notify those who are staying, hey, you're here. We want you to stay. So hopefully we cut turnover again for another year, which would be great. And also to reach out, particularly in these really hard to fill content areas, and try to hire some of the grads right away, even prior to graduation. Offer contingent upon graduation for some of these really sharp students in these teacher prep programs.
So even given the challenges that we have as a turnaround district, we're not the only school district in the Commonwealth or throughout the country that is having trouble attracting teachers in these content areas. I have had conversations with my good friend, the superintendent at Bay Path, who even says in certain content areas like math especially, very difficult to find qualified teachers. Is that a problem throughout the state and the country?
Yeah, I recently read a really interesting white paper on teacher recruitment, and those authors indicated they determined a 40% drop in people going into schools of education across the country in the last 7 to 8 years, and we're really feeling that pinch. So I would agree. All teaching positions across the board are harder to fill now than they were a decade ago. Math, science, special education in particular are very difficult. World languages, very difficult. And so everybody's struggling, to try to attract that latest grad. So you start to get that fighting among districts. And so we're all struggling to fill those positions. It's a definite need nationally.
So given everything that you've had over the last 2 years, obviously I believe you just forwarded to the council or to myself as chair the new turnaround plan that was renewed for 3 years. So we're coming off a 3-year initial plan, 3-year continuation of that plan. There were many in the community that thought this was going to be an easy three-year fix. I think there was even state officials that had come when they decided to take us over that said, oh, 2-3 years, you should be able to fix the ship and transition back to a school committee and the function. With the recent renewal of the turnaround plan, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I go back to my very first meeting. I think it was my first or second day on the job here, and a local official asked me, how long is this going to take? And I quickly said 5 to 7 years, and they were taken aback. It's just based on my experience in trying to implement any type of change in school districts. To change the culture of the adults and how they work takes a good 5 to 7 years. And I would argue in any company, when you're making a major change, it takes a long time to change, how people work, the culture. So I'm amazed that anyone would think this is a quick 2-year fix. There are a lot of complex issues that need to be worked through. The turnaround plan from day one, I've also said, is a very good review of educational literature. Like, these are all the things you should do in a very good school district. So the authors of the plan, I think, hit the right buckets. They understood what needed to be done. My contention has always been staging and phasing. How do you do this work now? Where do you establish priorities and understand people's ability to change and how much work any individual can do in a new fashion? That takes time. And that's why we've prioritized on a couple key, what I would call, high leverage initiatives. And we're going to see traction from those and then start to be able to address the other points identified on the plan. So 3 more years, I'm very pleased that I have that opportunity. I'd be a liar if I said that the first couple of years weren't a disaster, right? I mean, things did not go the way they should have gone. Too much turnover in the very area that was identified as the greatest need, which was leadership. And then you have your own leaders turn over. That's horribly unfortunate. I've said since day one, I'm committed here to stick out until we get the change. I certainly don't think I'm special, but I think that the idea of staying with it and being a consistent leader is part of the solution. So me finding folks who are equally committed and making sure they stay here with us as we do the work will accelerate our progress, because what I'm sure of is the children of Southbridge and the community of Southbridge not only deserve higher performing schools, but absolutely are capable of it. So it's a matter of us getting our act together.
And to that, have you instituted any groups within town that you've identified to maybe come aboard to assist with the turnaround plan outside of the educational parts?
Yeah, as receiver, it's an interesting position because I'm essentially given the power of school committee and the authority of a superintendent. And so having guidance, I think, is important, community-based guidance. So I was able to put together a advisory panel, and I've invited you to join. There are other community leaders as part of that. And the intention of this group is for me to be able to meet with them, present them with updates on our progress, talk with them things like, as we get into January, I'll be talking about the budget and priorities, get some feedback, talk about how to better disseminate information, whether or not policies are working, kind of in a sense, get that community feedback that I really need. So we tried to be sure that we got parents and community leaders, folks who may not have been involved in the schools in quite some time, but people with a stake here in Southbridge. First meeting occurred, and for me, I felt it was very successful. Again, good, solid feedback. I'm trying not to do this work in an echo chamber. It's, I think, very important to understand the impact of any changes that we've made.
And as we go forward with the turnaround, so part of I think the essence of when the state first came in and decided to take over the district, a lot of it was that community, town, school district lack of maybe working together partnership. So that's one step you work on. The other one was stability, which I think you're working on. Finances, I think we're on a pretty good track financially. So really, it's just getting to the day-to-day nuts and bolts. Is that what it is?
Well, yeah, I think you've nailed, those are all really important topics. And finance, I would agree, we are light years ahead of where we were, at the beginning of receivership on the finance side. So that's great. But the work of teaching and learning and curriculum and creating systems that are responsive to kids' needs, it sounds easy. We all, In some ways, all of us are an expert about schools because we attended school. So we think back to our own education, say, just do it this way and we'll all be set. And so much has evolved since each of us were in school. So it's a complex endeavor. And for us to recreate a lot of systems that, for all kinds of reasons, have fallen apart and need to function at much higher levels, it's going to take us a little while. There's no doubt about it. But picking priorities, sticking to them, we are seeing some progress.
And, you know, I know we've had these conversations, and I think you can see it at the elementary school level. Charlton Street, you really have a strong PBIS, you know, the
Positive behaviors, interventions, and supports.
yeah, just for the people out there, and I always forget what it is. That's been pretty strong at Charlton Street. West Street is just starting to get into it, and Eastwood Road. So the elementary schools are trying to build that foundation. Is that correct? Is that a fair
Yeah, and
assessment?
actually another leader in the district, which sometimes blows people's minds, is Southbridge Academy is also on the cutting edge of PBIS instruction.
And which is great. So as we develop that over year, the challenges once they get into that middle school environment, really, because middle school is that change of I'm going from smaller schools to a larger school, age, adolescence. How do we build those systems to make sure that they have that that smooth transition?
Yeah, I'm a former middle school principal, teacher. I taught also at high school, so middle school kids, I love them. Some people, they can drive you crazy. But what's so important for kids at that time is to be very painfully consistent, you know, because they're testing all boundaries all the time. I mean, it's the nature of a seventh grader, you know, just oppositionally defiant by nature. So you're right, you know, our kids come out of a highly controlled fifth grade where they're in a class with 20 classmates all day long and they move together as groups. They walk in a line everywhere they go in school and it's quiet and it's controlled, to a large, you know, state-of-the-art school with tall ceilings that echo, large open spaces, and they're given freedom to move. And what happens? Well, sixth graders run, seventh graders run and jump, and eighth graders kind of stroll, right? I mean, it happens in almost any school. So we are working on putting in place, you know, and what PBIS is all about is really teaching kids the expectations, really being clear about what happens when you don't follow them and what happens when you do. That means getting all the adults on the same page, making sure everyone agrees, and then being super consistent. And that's the hard part about middle school. High school age kids, you can be a little inconsistent, and they're old enough and mature enough to know, well, okay, I really am not supposed to do that here, even though you didn't say it explicitly. In middle school, you better be real clear about what you expect, because they're going to figure out a way, well, you didn't say I don't have to sit over here, right? You know, kids are just very good at that. And that plays out in middle school significantly. We also need to make programs that make sure that they're not frustrated academically, because a lot of the behaviors we see are avoidance behaviors. So kids purposely get in trouble in class so they don't have to stay in class and do the difficult math, right? Or they don't read very well, and so how does a kid make sure no one else knows that? Well, they become a clown, right? I think we've all experienced that in our lives at different times. But middle school is where that stuff really comes to light. So it's a matter of good quality instruction, being very clear about expectations. And, you know, this year I'm really happy we were able to add an adjustment counselor. So now we have an adjustment counselor at each grade in the middle school. And these are folks who are, you know, mental health professionals that can help kids deal with all the complexities of adolescence and puberty in particular. So that's a part of gaining control there, but you're right, it's going to take a little time. But we are seeing some progress.
So to wrap everything up, we're making incremental strides for improvement, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to take you know, a little bit longer and a lot of hard work.
I would agree 100%.
Okay, and as we look forward to this upcoming year, you know, we look forward to working with you. And anything else you want to add before we wrap up today about anything that I might have missed or thoughts that you have about the district and where we're going?
Yeah, one, you know, I continue to really enjoy working here in Southbridge. I'm really appreciative of the support from the town council. I've been able to give many members tours of the schools, and I just see a great deal of interest. I think people want to see us do better, and that's super. I would underscore, and this is a theme I've had with all my administrative team this year, is this work won't be done if we don't engage our teachers in the work. So it's really about making sure that they are empowered and they're part of the solution. And we are making some strides there. To me, it's essential that we create a learning environment where all the adults are learning with children. And so that's an area of great deal of focus that we need to have, empower our teachers. But yeah, I look forward to having additional chats with you, and at some point maybe we can use this TV. We'll start looking at some data.
Yeah, we could certainly do that. And I look forward to having even more of these because I think it is important that the public knows what's going in the schools, because they don't get a sense of the information, and it's sometimes not a clear picture of it. So the more that information that we can get out as a council and as a town, to perhaps move this forward, and maybe even get a state official to come join us one day to chat with us to talk about it. What the Department of Education and DESE, elementary and secondary education, what their thoughts are about the district, because that's the other thing. That, you get people out in the public, they go, well, they're out in Boston, they don't really care about us. They threw us under receivership and just kind of forgot about us. It's important to have that stakeholder here as well to talk about all the hard work that you've done and we've done as a community. So maybe we can do that in the future as well.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, on behalf of Southbridge Community TV, this has been Chairman Jack Jovan with Dr. Jeff Villar. Thank you, Jeff, for being here today. It was a great conversation. And I know our conversations can go on for hours if we wanted to, which is great. So that's why we will have more chats. And we wish everybody out in Southbridge a safe and happy New Year.